Hi there, English 112 at Haywood Community College, and welcome to week two. I'm going to go ahead and post the recording for the week, and happy Martin Luther King Day to everybody, so that you can watch this and at your discretion. We have a lot of different things to talk about today. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview on some of the expectations that I have for some of the larger assignments coming up. And then I'm also going to give you a little information on Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman. So this might be a bit of a longer video, but hopefully I can address any questions up front. All right, so get started. Okay, so the first thing that you'll see, this is week two. So we're going to be focusing in on Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman, and then also how to respond to literature. So if you've had me in class before, you may have experienced a one-page paper. So everybody take a moment to click on this. So a one-page paper is exactly what it sounds like. It's a reading response that you do every single week. And in the reading response, the focus is that you're going to consistently use MLA format to discuss the literature of the week by taking a unique position and articulating it and following reasoning and evidence in order to create a strong claim. So what I do for that is I focus in on something called claim evidence reasoning, CER, which is where your first sentence is going to be a thesis, followed by the evidence that you're going to be using from the text of the week, and then reasoning and articulating your position. So the prompt is usually fairly open. The only thing that I ask is that you're using the reading from the week. And so this week we're focusing more so on Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman. So my expectation is that those are going to be the focus of your reading response. And if you want to see what one of my examples looks like, I have one right here that I wrote on Mrs. Dalloway, and so you can use that. And so if this is a little bit of a stretch for you, trust me, I understand it's always a bit of a learning curve, but I can promise that it's usually one of the first things that students say that they really get a lot out of in regards to composition. So I'm going to pop on over to our board. So I have some things here that are supplementary. Like this is an example for a task for this week on how to find a peer-reviewed journal. And then I have some extra guidelines for how to research for a forum post here. And then how to discuss and write an analysis prompt, which is what the one-page paper was about, and then MLA layout and citation guides. So these things are going to be supplementary for you, and you can use them to help guide you if you feel like you're getting stuck in anything regarding our class. So before I get started on the lecture for the week, I wanted to show you where your readings were. So you're going to have readings from Whitman. You'll also have readings from Emily Dickinson, and I'll let you know when I'm transitioning over to the lecture. And so here are pieces from Walt Whitman and the poetry about Whitman. I do very much love Erica Zhang's Testament to Walt Whitman. There is some graphic language in this poem. And so if you're really sensitive to expletives or graphic language, just that is a content warning for that poem. And then I've also got Dickinson poems here. Some additional background information on Emily Dickinson is here, as well as an example peer-reviewed article, and then some additional poems and things that you can use for your study as you are writing your reading response from this week. So the coursework for the week is you're going to have a Emily Dickinson Walt Whitman research forum. And so in this forum, what I want you to expect is that it'll be on Harmonize, which I'm going to be using primarily as our discussion forum. But in a 250 word response, you're going to answer the question, how do literary critics define Dickinson as a confessional poet? And what is she confessing? How does she confess? Why use the word confessional? And so if you don't know what confessional poetry is, it's exactly how it sounds. It's the idea of like confessing or like something that's like inside of you. And so you're going to respond to that, but then you're also going to find a peer reviewed journal article that addresses a topic in her poetry. That then you will respond to who the audience of the journal article is, what field or discipline does the journal relate to, based on some subjects from Emily Dickinson's poetry. I do also have a few that I've attached here in case you struggle finding your own. But use the Haywood Community College EBSCO hosts website, as well as you can like find things on Google Scholar. And then the last thing, to make sure that you're having interactive communication with your classmates, is to respond to two of your peers in regards to the research. So we're going to look at some of Dickinson and Whitman's poetry, but then you're going to deep dive into some concepts. And that is where you're going to have a lot of the unique angle that we're going to have in English 112. So the reading response here, that is the one-page paper that I mentioned earlier. And so as I'm lecturing, just kind of keep in mind what some topics would be that you'd be interested in. All right. Okay, so that's the housekeeping for the week. Let's go ahead and start talking about Whitman and Dickinson. So if you'd like to follow along, you can get onto the slides with me, and you can always access these as you move through the course content. So Whitman and Dickinson. All right. So if you are familiar at all with the Transcendentalists, and if you take American literature too, you'll probably go into more detail about this, but a very famous transcendentalist was Ralph Waldo Emerson. And so he wrote this to Walt Whitman in 1855. Dear sir, I am not blind to the world, the wonderful gift of leaves of grass. I find it the most extraordinary piece of wit and wisdom that America has yet contributed. I'm very happy in reading it, as great power makes us happy. It meets the demand I'm always making of what seem to be sterile and stingy nature, as if too much handiwork or too much limp in the temperament were making our Western wits fat and mean. I give you joy of your free and brave thought. I have great joy in it. I feel incomparable things said incomparably well as they must be. I find the courage of treatment which so delights us and which large perception can only inspire. So it's just kind of an idea of like how all of these authors and all of these poets at the time really viewed like Walt Whitman's style to be very different. He was breaking conventions of the time. He was also making sure that like everybody knew that like this movement was so important for these people as they were going through. And the next slide over, we're going to talk about Walt Whitman. So Walt Whitman he was a romantic poet. He was probably considered one of the American greats. Very stylistic. He broke conventions. Very interesting, expansive personality. But some of the things that you'll see in his poetry is his cadence, long, easy sweep of sound. He did not use meter or rhyme. He used a lot of biblical references. Free verse, poetry without rhyme or meter was very unique at this time period. And then he used things called catalog poetry, which are things that related to people and events. He also utilized a parallel structure, which is a repetition of phrases, clauses, or sentences that have the same grammatical structure. And so he also used things like alliteration and assonance and imagery and onomatopoeia and coda and all these different types of literary elements that are like all about sensation and like the rhythm of the language as opposed to just like the strict form of meter. Emily Dickinson. Okay, so Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman were not necessarily contemporaries of each other, but stylistically, they're two of like the American greatest poets. Very different backgrounds, very different types of writing. Emily Dickinson was much more metrical. And so, unlike Whitman, she was like introverted, secretive, and reclusive. And Walt Whitman was also openly gay. And Emily Dickinson was a recluse and she lived alone with her family. And she wrote all of her poems without intending to be published. And they were published posthumously. So She wrote a lot about spirituality, she wrote a lot about death, she used a lot of really strong imagery, metaphors, and similes in her work, and she's like Walt Whitman considered a truly American poet, and so while he uses free verse, she uses ballad meter, right? Bouncing iambic tetrameter. So if you think about it like "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine," yeah, it bounces up and down. So like that kind of bouncy cadence, it's very unique to her. She also uses a lot of dashes. And slant rhyme, which is something that's very unique to her style, like nerve, love, society, majority, like those words that like are not quite rhymes, but they're close enough. Like in the select in this poem, soul selects her own society. It's soul selects her own society, then shuts the door to her divine majority in present no more. Like it's very specific in like how she writes. And so you'll notice that when you look at both Dickinson's work and Whitman's work and how different they are, but then how they kind of resonate in regards to this like American individualism and like this idea of like, who are we and what are we aiming for? But both of them use irony in order to subvert expectations. And so pay attention to that in Because I Could Not Stop for Death, and paradoxical points in Emily Dickinson's work, like Much Madness's divinest sense is something that's very self contradictory, but also appears in a lot of her work. So as you're reading Whitman and as you're reading Dickinson and kind of thinking through how you're going to like process through these new concepts and like do research on literature, just kind of keep in mind like what they have in common and what the roots of their messages are and like what makes them, American poets as you think through that for like American literature too later on. So, anyway, I hope you all have a great week and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.